have been building our calendar of events for the season. I'm not going to go into them because many of them are still penciled in. But if you want to stay updated, sign up for our email newsletter. It comes out once a week, and basically it's the events with a little bit about books that our staff picks. But I will mention that next Wednesday, Tracy Penfield, who is the founder of Safe Art, will talk about her new book, which is called The Curriculum of Courage, Making Safe Art. And it's about using art to heal traumas of various parts in your life. So she'll be here next Wednesday. But tonight, we have the privilege of welcoming Cindy Pierce back. And I think it's a great way to start our new year of events, because Cindy has such a great way of taking really challenging topics, sex and kids and how kids deal with sex, and presenting them a way that makes it approachable for both grown-ups and kids and basically anyone. She makes us laugh at ourselves even while we're dealing with serious issues, and that's a real gift. Cindy is the author of 3 books, Finding the Doorbell, which is sadly out of print, Sexploitation, which we have out front, which is geared more toward a younger audience, and her new book, which is Sex, College, and Social Media. She has done and continues to do numerous presentations across the country. She was telling us about visiting many private schools and talking directly with kids, and that's really an important thing. She has won storytelling competitions, and she's been recognized as a remarkable woman in the arts by New Yorker magazine, which I think is wonderful. And she was also named by the Center for Women and Gender at Dartmouth College a vagina warrior. She lives with her husband Bruce and their 3 teenage kids, so she knows of what she speaks. She lives in Etna, and where they own and run Pierce's Inn. So please help me welcome Cindy.
Thanks for coming out on this funky night. The weather cooperated, and I appreciate you rallying out. Let's see, I have my 1A there. It's all around here, so I'm going to keep myself focused with some notes. Traveling, 12 years ago when I started this, I went to my niece's sorority, and my assumption was these young people, they've got the internet, they got everything they need. They don't need to learn anything, but my niece said, come speak to our group, so I go into the sorority, and I didn't really want to get too graphic, because, although I'm willing to go there, I didn't want to drag them with me. And they looked a little timid at first. And so I kind of described some things and told a few stories. And then at the end, a woman right behind me, she said, excuse me, you talked about orgasms, but I need a little more specific information. And as I turned my head, the entire room erupted with fists in the air like this. Yeah! Like, yikes, these poor dears. And I assume these Dartmouth women, they have 10-week terms, they're very busy, they're very smart. Maybe these people really don't have the knowledge because they're not they're too busy. Need to be louder. Okay, I'm going to use the mic.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, all right, here we
Is it
go.
on?
Oh, nope, sorry, got to turn that on. There we go. Okay, I'll give it a little distance here. So, I went on and explained things more, completely. And then I thought, gosh, and then my nephew, who was also the class of 06, invited me to, well, he didn't invite me, the poor dear did not invite me. In fact, a little bit of a liability for him. He kind of skirted around having me come to Dartmouth to his fraternity till 5 days before he graduated. And his football team went around him and said, we heard your auntie's got a little information. And so I figured I'd go speak and be out of there. So in an hour, I'd tell my stories. And then for 2 hours, I took questions. And now I was thinking, wow, okay, I got to explore it. So then I went to another college and realized these people, the internet, because of the internet, they are even worse off. They really don't have a lot of knowledge. And they're having tons of sex, tons of adventurous sex. And now this was when internet porn, it just kind of started rolling. Phones were, can you hear?
Oh, you still can't hear. How about this?
Keep it close.
I'll keep it close. Just got a little kickback. I feel so loud, but I apologize. All right, I'm going to keep letting me know if I'm not clear enough. Hello, Brian. So these I thought, wow, we've got some issues here. So really I didn't have time to be doing this work. I had no time to be doing this work. And I felt this urgency, and it really is my calling. It's what I think I'm supposed to be doing, because I can go in and talk to a whole fraternity, because I've been talking to boys my whole life. I knew about boys. I knew their weaknesses, their things that made them nervous, things that made them feel vulnerable, how they didn't feel enough in all these ways. So I've been hearing all about this, but then the magnification with social media and porn really took it to the next level. And now we're in a point where it's a tidal wave. The culture is so intense. And so many parents are yielding because they say, oh, this is too much and this is beyond me and I can't even begin to kind of combat this. So the parents who pull back, kids right now who are in college and just out of college, they were raised by wolves when it comes to, their parents were all over them on their SATs and their grades and they were micromanaging them like nobody's business, but they were not taking on the social media. And at the time when I started this, when I talked to boys, they were like, we look at porn 46 to 60% of the time, when we masturbate. I'm getting right into it, people. We're not messing around. So when you come here, I usually warm up, but I'm going right into it. These young men in this first group said to me, they pulled me aside and said, we're pretty worried about a couple guys we know cannot masturbate without looking at porn, and they were so concerned, and they just thought that was so horrific. And at the time, having access to a computer and access to porn was definitely a socioeconomic divide. And as time went on, that gap closed, because if there's people without homes, without food, who have phones and have access to porn. Now, when I talk about porn is just part of it. Porn culture, the messages about sex, it's everywhere. Porn culture is coming at us through marketing media, YouTube, Netflix, it's everywhere. I mean, remember when NBC, CBS, all the main channels, it was until 9 o'clock, it was kind of decent. It's off the rails pretty early in the game. Like, our kids are just seeing, so we're all desensitized to this. Now, I'm not trying to stop the porn industry. The porn industry owns the world. 30 to 35% of what crosses the internet is porn. So it's winning. It's winning. It's bigger than the NFL, the NHL. It's unbelievable. So my thing is, I want young people to be educated, because the people who question the work I'm doing are usually men who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who think I'm trying to stop masturbation. I'm like, good luck with that. Because I'm cheering masturbation on. Healthiest thing going. However, what fuels it is what changed. And the concern I get is from college guys, from the consumers. Because I go in there and I talk so openly, they tell me everything and anything. That's the advantage I have. So this work that I didn't intend to do just started filling me up with information. And then when I see studies and when I see research that backs up what I'm hearing in the trenches, that's what I listen to, and that's what I put in this book. So, and I also gathered the wisdom from people who are in it and have who are in the trenches, who are doing the work. There's some studies that will say, this percentage, I think I've seen a study that says 60% of boys look at porn. I'm sorry, it's hard to find a guy who has not looked at porn. It's really hard. And now, finally, there are studies that are reflecting what I'm hearing. Because when I first talked to those guys at Dartmouth, I said, fellas, imagine if you didn't look at porn for 3 weeks. What do you think would happen? And we had a little discussion. If you did a porn detox. I did not expect them to do this. But 6 months later, there were 5 juniors in that group who brought me back to speak to another group. So these 5 juniors gathered me up, and 2 boys come up to me, they're like, Cindy, we did your porn detox. I'm like, what? We did. And the first guy says, well, I just went 2 months. And now I have just a much, less, a smaller diet of porn, just a less porn than I was looking at. The other guy said, I've gone 6 months. And they both said the highlight reel has changed. What erectile dysfunction has returned. The blue steel is back. They said everything is different. What's running through our heads? Our sex lives have changed. And I thought, my gosh. So I keep saying this, and then finally some research started to back that up. And kept hearing this more and more and more. Now here's something that's different. Just a year and a half ago, I was in a school, or year and a half ago, in a school, all boys, and a young guy, pretty courageous of him to say this in front of all these juniors and seniors, and he said, so if you think we shouldn't be looking at porn, how do you expect us to masturbate? And I'm never speechless, never. And I was and I'm thinking, and I'm kind of looking at the older guys, expecting them to speak up and say, dude, like, use your imagination. No, they're all looking at me like, tell us. And what came out of my mouth, of course, was, for thousands of years, boys have been jerking off using their imagination. And this was like a breakthrough idea. They were like, oh! I was like, oh my gosh, no one suggested that? I mean, crazy. All right, now I'm off track right away. Now, the hookup scene in college, this is something that really drives this work, is that I'm all about sex, I'm all about healthy sex, I'm all about women being empowered and owning their sexuality, vaginal pride. That's my jam, man. This is what I'm after. However, I hear girls, particularly in high school, talking a big game about being, oh, I am sexually liberated. I am an empowered feminist. I should be able to hook up with whomever I want. I should be able to send nude pictures because I own my sexuality. Now, this is what I'm all about, owning your sexuality. But my research, Peggy Orenstein's research, who wrote Girls and Sex, Nancy Jo Sales, American Girls, we're hearing a lot of girls talking the big game, but when you start to ask them about what that empowerment looks like, it is a very, it doesn't take much before that crumbles. Because what does that empowerment look like? Well, I'm pleasing my partner, male partner. I'm providing pleasure. I seem hot. People think of me as hot and sexually adventurous. And then when you say, are you having orgasms? No, I don't think I'm capable. I'm like, okay, so we're really here providing services. Is that what we're here for? This is what it comes down to. So, pleasure education is not something that happens. Parents don't do it. No one really wants to talk about it. You think that she'll figure it out. And whether you're a girl is sleeping with another girl, that's still pleasure education. The assumption is two women together will have that dialed in. Every woman is different on every day. You need to be the GPS, guiding your partner in, but no one teaches young girls this. So this is what, if you start hooking up in high school and you keep thinking, well, next time I hook up, I think it'll work out, or I'll figure it out. And everyone pretends there's this big talk of like, we're part of the hookup club. This is, and you're not hearing that it's great sex. Like most of what you get out of people is, it's fine. I'm like, fine? I want it to be a lot more than fine, okay? So years of below average sex, what does that lead to? A lifetime of below average sex. So trying to interrupt that, getting women in touch. And so hooking up now, the whole thing about hookup culture is it's not about communication. It's about, we don't want drama. We're really busy. We have aspirations, we don't have time. And now we've got Tinder, they've got people hooking up through Tinder, and very quickly that, it's starting in college and going beyond. Even hearing of some high school students in a boarding school getting on Tinder, pretending they're 18, sneaking off campus, meeting a car with some random person and hooking up with that person. And these dating apps, they're all different, but Tinder is one that you put your picture, so it's based on how you look, a little bit of information. You put it on Tinder. If someone likes the looks of you, they swipe right. And then if you like the looks of that person, you swipe right, and then you're connected. And then you've got each other's contact information. And what they're finding is that people have a hard time making the break from texting. So you've got this cultivated image that you've put out there, this, that you have to now live up to. And that's the hard part, is people get nervous to actually go connect with people. Now, the older dating apps where you really, I'm spacing the names, but what is it? Match.com, that's like eliminating the surface stuff. You get to the values and the stuff you're interested in. And that actually took some effort, and then you connect, and I know great marriages that have come out of those dating apps. Tinder, yes, are there good matches that occasionally come out of Tinder? Occasionally, but when you hear the stories, pretty brutal. You know, a lot of young women talk about, in cities, they talk about putting themselves out there on Tinder, and someone shows interest and says something like, "What are you doing this weekend?" And they're like, oh my gosh, we got a match. And even go on a date, things go pretty well, but then they hear things like this: you don't seem like the kind of woman who would be on Tinder. And she's thinking to herself, and what about you? So some of these dating apps really favor the fellas. And so a lot of these women say, they get these guys who say, "Oh, what are you doing this weekend?" They write back, "I'd love to get together." They keep their schedule free. And then it turns out that guy, he's casting a net to about 30 women, taking his best option. And certainly it happens on the reverse, women, taking his best option and then going with that. So a lot of women just waiting for, hoping, and it's just really disheartening. So I'm hearing a lot of, and then some women talking about how putting themselves out there and that no one swipes right. It's really challenging. But the biggest thing about this, social media, texting, there's a distance. So even in high school, sometimes the handlers get involved, which used to be a 5th grade thing. I always joke about. My husband said he had a girlfriend for 3 weeks. He never really spoke to her, but the handlers handled everything. And they dated, they went to the movies as a group, they went skiing, they even rode the chairlift, but they never spoke. And then the handlers had them break up. And so these handlers, which seems very 5th grade, maybe 7th grade, well, I'll tell you, handlers in high school, that's how it's rolling in high school, and even college, of like, he's interested in hooking up with you. All right, let's get your digits together. And now you've got all these, the support crew and the handlers involved with expectations. So as a young man, you're struggling to feel enough. You're struggling to constantly prove your heterosexuality, prove your masculinity. This is the pressure you are under as a young man. So feeling enough as a guy is a constant, it plagues them. And I hear this over and over. This has never been any different for young men, feeling enough. But now we have social media, certainly for girls too, the pressure of the culture. But young men, picture this: you've got handlers, you've got expectations about hooking up. And hooking up is very vague, because hooking up could be kissing, hugging, snuggling, oral sex, intercourse, anal sex, threesome, foursome, and it can cover the spectrum. And that's a very convenient thing to have it be that vague, because you could say to one group of friends who would judge you harshly and say, "Oh, we just hooked up." And then if you want to impress another person with the same act, you can, or the same partner with whatever you did, and you can say, "We totally hooked up." So you get that vagueness is very convenient to keep your reputation. But getting back to all that, when you have all those people invested and observing your connections and your hookup, there's a lot of pressure. So certainly for guys, there's the number one reason a teenager wants to hook up is not because he wants to get off, not because he likes usually the girl in that situation, but it's to impress his friends, to say, "This is the person I hooked up with." So that energy with everyone involved puts pressure on getting there. So this is really, and someone you don't know well, so communication is not there. You don't know the person. There's not much interaction. So we're asking you with a partner, like, where does great sex happen? When you can communicate, there's shared respect, there's a balance of interest, there's a sense of humor, because you need your sense of humor. 2 naked people together is a recipe for disaster and shame. And so with a little sense of humor, you can get through that, and plus communication. And that is where great sex is happening. But this below average sex is pretty much the accepted way, and everyone's checking that box, becoming part, getting into it. So these young men, people always say, "But my son, I'm so worried about him. He's the poor dear. He's going to be falsely accused of sexual assault." Just want to put out there a couple things and the reason why we always use the word he when we talk about sexual assault, because almost all sexual assaults are committed by boys and men against boys, men, girls, and women. Almost all. So that's why he is often used. Now, young men who have been sexually assaulted, it is much more difficult in our culture to admit that, because you're questioned. If you're, you're questioned on, on a number of levels. But once again, it's another way to put you down. So men, that's an underreported thing. But under sexual assault, 68% of sexual assaults are not reported. But back to this false accusation. Now, so many moms in particular come to me and worry about their poor dear who's going to be falsely accused. False accusations are 2 to 8% in most studies, 2 to 10 in others, which is equal to all other crimes. A young man has a higher chance of being a victim of sexual assault than he does of being falsely accused. But you talk to young men, they're like, but what about Duke? What about UVA? And they cling to the press really, really highlights these things, and they cling to those as that they are going to be these victims of false accusations. And we need to twist our lens here, like look at it differently, and talk to our boys about communication, about respect, about consent. And people say, so people in our age range, most of us in here, have a harder time with affirmative consent than young people do. And, parents are saying to the kids, what? They want you to keep a checklist? Because affirmative consent is affirmative, voluntary, conscious, as in not intoxicated, agreement to engage in sexual activity every step of the way. And this is what I hear from people who are resistant. What do you want me to keep the checklist? No, it's checking in. Does that feel good? Is this okay? Are you comfortable with that? You know what? In colleges, when this started coming into the public, people were talking about affirmative consent. Older students had a harder time. Younger students picked up on it more because they're getting the training in orientation, and they had more conversations about these things in high school. And it's starting to show up. They're more receptive than older people. And we really need to listen to what they say. They're willing to get it, and we need to support it. If you have college students, support this idea that we need to just keep checking in. And it doesn't matter whoever in that partnership of sexual activity, whoever wants to move to the next step, that's who asks for consent. Now, here's another thing. Every personal story I've heard, the research I read, the stories I read, over and over, I hear young women in particular who say, you know what, I said no, but then he persisted, and I didn't want it to be awkward. I didn't want to be, and awkward is what we're really aiming for, because that is the best. Like, we need practice being awkward, like in an awkward situation. Like, this is, how do we address, like, you got to be comfortable. This is where I talk about social courage. Like, you got to be able to get in there, like, make an uncomfortable situation. But how do people learn that? They don't learn it by stopping a sexual assault. All these parents say, my kid better have the courage to stop a sexual assault. Often coming from a parent who doesn't have the courage to call out a coworker for being racist, misogynist. We all are trying to be so nice. There's this nice and polite. We actually, and I hear from girls and women, and I read this over and over, I didn't want to be harsh. I didn't want to be rude or I didn't want to come across. But actually, we want them to do that. But here's what we're still telling little girls. Be nice. Be polite. Now, I'm the fourth daughter, and I was not taught to be nice and polite, which is probably why I'm doing this. And I think the older girls were taught that in my family. The first girl behaved. The second one came out guns a-blazing. She took my family down with her ability to, some of you know her. So, Winston, she really, she created a 7-lane highway for the last two kids. And basically my parents turned to us and said, look, let's just work together here. Wear what you want, speak how you want, but more than anything, you gotta speak your mind and speak up. So and people would respond, adults, well, you're just a little too much. That's a little brash. They had all these words to try to keep me down, but I had so much support in my family, like all these siblings, that I just kept storming. And it was paying off. I got into some dicey situations, and my brashness, I was trained by boys. Like, when you get into a situation, like, you need visuals, you need a strong voice, and you gotta be clear. I'm like, this is where the limit is. I mean, I was really intense on my limits, and it really panned out. Now you can't get everyone to do that, but they need practice. First, calling people out for littering, being mean. We need the practice on the small stuff. So when you get to the racism and the misogyny and the homophobia and the transphobia, then you can start calling those things out. And people say, well, why do we give girls training in martial arts? Like, most sexual assaults are by someone they know. I can't tell you how many people say my best friend raped me, my boyfriend raped me, a guy I've known forever. It's almost always someone they know well. So the martial arts of learning, like any self-defense, is in some cases you will use in a situation, but really what it does is it closes that gap of being nice and polite and getting to, like, I always say, you gotta have your snark on tap, ladies. Like, you gotta be able to, you can be a nice, polite person 98% of the time. When someone crosses your boundaries, you don't want the delay. You wanna go right into your quiver of mean and be ready to run. And I'm telling you, that is why we want girls in martial arts. That's why we want girls in sports. You want to give them a sense of their power. And when they get over the being nice, they can stand up for themselves. But that takes practice over years. And so I was told a lot by people, you're really, that since I was, quite small. But because I just had the message from my parents that this is a good thing. And you know what? My own kid, I even did this to my own kid. She's saucy and she's full of beans and she's got her fire. And sometimes we're like, this is going to be awesome when she's grown up, but it's coming up against us every once in a while. And sometimes you're like, tone it down there, Sister Sledge. And one time, someone was saying to her, like, sometimes you're a little, giving her that talk, and I was thinking, maybe I've overdone it. Maybe I've overdone it. Maybe there is a limit to this. And my daughter turned to me and said, Mom, that person crossed my boundary, and I was clear the first time and polite, and then they pushed, and then I pulled out the meat, and I was like, boom. Done. Gotcha. Like, I thought she was just firing around, like, right out of the blocks. But, like, when she explained to me, she's very clear. She knows what she wants, knows what she doesn't want. So, I think, and you can be that strong person and still have someone violate you. Because I want to just jump to that flip side. So many boys are under that pressure. They're under that pressure to see this through. This is where I didn't believe it at first. I thought, most kids know you can't use physical restraint. Many young women, bright young women I hear, describe to me they have this wonderful conversation, they like this guy, things are going well, the door closes in the room, and all of a sudden it's physical restraint, held down and violated. And this is where, you think, these are bright, with it, educated kids. What is going on here? And this is where the influences of, if you've told your friends this is what you're going to do, you're going to use coercion, turning a no into a yes. Alcohol is that's the social contract in college, is we drink and we're all open to this hookup scene. That's kind of the social contract. And these days, and at Dartmouth, I know intervention has become more of a normal practice. Walking up to someone you don't even know when you see two people who are too intoxicated to give consent and breaking them apart. Kids I know said they look at each other, they don't even know a person, they say, we got to break this up. One takes one person, one takes the other, distract them with food, get them out of the situation. Sometimes those people find their way back, but that's a more accepted practice. Intervention makes a difference. But, teaching young men, we need to engage young men in the solution, because I also hear from colleges that so many guys talk a good game. And everyone, when they're sober, you should hear, I hear women in sororities, all of you older people don't think we use condoms. Like, we are so on this like safer sex thing, like we are so on condoms, like we're so, come on now. And like guys are like, we totally get it. They're in there in the conversation about consent, they get it, they want to educate people, they want to get it going. But as soon as you get into a party atmosphere, the setting has changed. And that's where there's that, once you get that drink in your hand, there's sort of this ticket I don't have to be responsible for what I say. I don't have to be responsible for what I do. And that social contract creates an environment which allows for a different kind of interaction, and that's where problems get going. And social media keeps us at a distance. Reading social cues, kids don't have a lot of practice reading social cues. And we're asking them in the dark, under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of optimistic arousal, to read a social cue with someone they barely know. And this is where we need to, talk to kids about less phone time. And I got a kid, I got 3 kids who love the phone, but we make certain rules that, here's a time we're not going to have phones. In the car, we're going to talk, we're going to interact. Because they need more practice. So people say, well, when I was in college, everyone says kids are drinking so much and that it's no different than it ever was. It's quite different, actually. There are more people. So I was a non-drinker in college, one of the few. There was one other kid who had been through rehab a couple times, and we were the non-drinkers. And these days, tons of kids on campuses don't drink, but the kids who are drinking significantly more. And this is where the pressure of social media, and this is where the parents think it's those grades again. They're just so stressed about the grades. And they are stressed about the grades. We live in Precious Town, USA, where kids are freaked out about, it's unbelievable what it's like for these kids. But beyond that, what we can't see, 90% of their social lives, we cannot see. It's happening on their phones, and that is a layering and a layering and a layering of, when I talk to young guys, I'm like, what do you guys post? They kind of one-up, they talk about, you just cool stuff you do. You post it. If you did cool stuff, you do a 720, you post it. You do this, you post it. And with girls, it's different. So girls are posting things, and this is what is, I find, it's all about how you look. And the comments you get, and girls, they praise each other. I always talk to them, you praise, you put up the hot picture and they pigeon-toed, hands on hips, click, and they post the picture, and then it's like, oh my God, hot, gorge, goals. Goals means my goal is to look like you, and this is what we get, this is what I mean. And the boys are like, oh, I'll tap that, and this is the affirmation that these young women and girls are getting. And how do you give that up if that's the attention you're getting? That's hard to give up. So for girls, it's mostly based on looks and keeping that thing going. But guys have to keep their Snapchat stories going. There's this constant need to keep everything moving and to keep, interacting on social media. And that adds such a layer of intense stress on kids. They can't even acknowledge it, because who's on duty on social media? No lifeguard, no referee. It's them. It's Lord of the Flies out there. Now, everyone thinks it's bullying. There's so many great things about social media. It is starting movements. It's connecting you to more people. But it's almost sometimes like you're connected 30 miles wide, 1 inch deep, rather than, meaningful connections. And everyone complains. They all say, I can't believe I can't stop myself. I know, I'm on this all the time, but they're back at it. So we need to keep that discussion going of get yourself centered, slow down. So what are the things? I know at Hanover, Diane, who teaches the health course, she did a quarter of meditation just to see how it would go. And it went pretty well, but then it was only for a quarter. The kids were begging her to get it going again. I am telling schools to make that, this is the next yoga. Every kid right now in college and high school, when they're older, this will be part of their day. Mindfulness, sitting, mindful walking. We need to give kids the opportunity to bring it down, to bring the, slow down their lives, because things are amped up so much. Now, let me just make sure. Just going to throw a couple facts out there. So porn, the average age a boy in the U.S. looks at porn is 9 at this point. And when I finished my first book, it was 11. And so access, it's easy. It's skewing expectations, how bodies look, how they respond. As I think I said, 30 to 35% of what crosses the internet is porn. So I just want to educate the viewers so that they know what they're up against. Okay, let's see. Yeah, look at me busting through it. Oh, and in porn, so this is one thing that's really changing. So 50 Shades of Grey, I remember when that thing came out, the first movie. I mean, first of all, the book, I'd go to a school and 14-year-old boys are like, hey, I know everything about sex because I read 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah. Then they'd hear my talk. So this is where sex education is happening. Porn, boys say to me all the time, I ask my older brother, can you explain porn? Can you explain sex? And the brother says, oh, just go look at porn. Yikes. And porn has become increasingly more violent. The porn industry, when you read about the people who are creating porn, if you don't believe me, a few things to watch. Hot Girls Wanted, documentary film, worth checking out. Sexy Baby is another one. The porn industry, boys and young men are telling me that porn is messing with their sexuality. So it's not the feminist, 51-year-old woman who's, going up against it. I'm getting my information from the consumers. They're lost, they're confused, they want to know things. When they talk about pleasure, they say, I can't really figure that out. And I'm the perfect person to ask. Just a rando crazy lady who comes into your fraternity or to talk to you, they're like, hey, they'll ask me anything. So, this is where, I think they feel like it's so misleading because the women in porn are surgically altered to look like 12-year-old girls. Their pubic hair is waxed from anus to navel to look like 12-year-old girls. So this is misleading in itself. The producers, they really want to amp it up because porn is different than a drug. A drug, you need more of the drug. With porn, you need variety. So they just keep the variety going. And now they're dictating what is attractive and what gets people off. And so in heterosexual relationships, a lot of young men come back to their female partners and say, you don't look right, because this is what all women, finally someone said to me, my boyfriend at 16 said all women don't, shave their pubic hair. And finally she, at 20, she's like, all women? He was 16. Obviously they were on porn. Be like, who are all those women? That's, And she was like, what am I thinking? And, I think, porn, boys are just almost directed towards it. And, at this point, Hustler, which was so heinous and wretched when I was a kid, I almost want to hand that to my kid and say, here, go ahead, take a look. Come on, dig in here, fella, dig in. But of course, it's really shaping what people are expecting. Okay. Want to just... so genital image for girls, genital image for boys. I could walk into a group of boys and say this and change lives. This is all I'd have to say. The average size penis in porn is 8 inches. The average size penis erect out in the world is 5.5. I've had boys leap from their seats and say, yes! Buddies are high-fiving them. Yes! Yes! Because if you're a heterosexual boy and you're looking at porn, you get this idea of what you're supposed to look like. It's hard. And then when your partner is not, and they simulate a lot of rape. It's not consensual. When you see that over and over and your partner's not responding, you start to ask questions. What don't I have? What is wrong with me? And I also want to say just one thing before I take questions. LGBTQ, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and Q could be questioning or queer, and genderqueer, which is someone who doesn't identify as male or female, goes by they. So this is something that, once again, our generation struggles with. Young kids, they're getting it. They're not that phased. And in schools, the adults are having a harder time than a lot of even the most evolved adults are very protective, worried about, and there's certainly bullying. These are the highest rate of sexual assault is among transgender and bisexual people. So transgender kids, there's different stages. So there's some kids will have their pituitary gland maybe in middle school, pituitary gland slowed down so they can, before puberty comes in, to sort of decide, am I going to transition? And I know kids who are 12 years old who are transitioned, socially transitioned, not surgically. And people say, oh, they should wait till they're 18. This is something that our generation thinks should happen. This is the highest rate of suicide. you know, among kids are kids who don't feel comfortable, you know, transitioning. And so sexual orientation, very different than gender identity. Gender identity could evolve, could change, but for the most part, if a kid says, I was born a girl, but I am not a girl. Some people say their kids at 3 years old or in the back of in the booster seat, like, I am not a girl. I am not a girl. And the parent allows them to, you know, explore with clothing, explore and express themselves in gender neutral clothing. Those kids are healthier. But when we try to say, wait till you're 18, that's where the danger occurs. So, kids, so social transition can be, you know, presenting with the gender, you know, stereotypical clothes that fit the gender you identify with. And surgical it's expensive. It's $94,000 to transition female to male. So a lot of people can't afford to that surgery, so may not have surgery. Male to female is easier and cheaper, but still an expensive endeavor. But this is something we need to support. So I hear people my age, even my most evolved friends, say, this isn't real. This is just a trend. People just... For you to say, this is not my gender, I don't feel right in this, you know, I am male or I am female, that's something we need to respect and listen to. And no one decides on someone's pronoun or their gender except the person. They decide. So we need to listen to that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because that is something on college campuses, that's where probably the best work is being done and a lot of conversation is happening. So, all righty, thank you very much, and I will take some questions.
Are your kids afraid to be seen with you?
Oh yeah.
You are a normal parent.
Yes. I am the social liability on wheels. They try to get me through the call, like they don't want to come in with me, and they're like, just keep moving, Mom, just keep moving. And when their friends come over, I remember when they were younger, they were like, do you think we could get through this visit without you saying vagina or penis? And I'd say, you know what, I'm going to aim for that, but if it comes up, I'm jumping on it. So yeah, my own mother was a social liability, and I've come into it.
How did you teach your daughter to be that sort of strong woman? I mean, how often did you reiterate what you believe in?
Yes, good question. It was a constant layering, and I think all of this teaching is layering. Sometimes this is when people want to teach their kids about sex, they're like, did it, check, done. No. That's a conversation that needs to happen over and over and over and over. And my good friend Michael Lyons is in the back there, Dr. Michael Lyons, and he's the one who got me doing that with my kids when they were young. But as far as, I think my husband is a very comfortable man with his, you know, he's more of a gentle soul. When we were dating, one time we were somewhere and someone said something to me, and I'm like in the person's face. I'm still don't drink, so this is stone sober. I'm like letting people have it. And one time my husband, he goes, you know what I love about you? He goes, I'm not a fighter. I'm not a fighting guy. And I'm never, you're off the bar stool in a person's face before I've even registered what has occurred. It is so great. I will never have to defend your honor because you do a fine job yourself. So you can see our dynamic is, you know, so our kids have grown up with parents who have been speaking about this, and we just keep having conversation. We use books, we use movies. Negative examples are great. We're Patriots fans, so you get the culture of cheerleaders. I mean, we really just have anything they're exposed to. We just keep having conversations. So the layering is kind of paying off. And I was going to say, I remember, I didn't keep magazines around the house, women's magazines, except for Oprah. And so O Magazine was in our house. And I remember one time when Sadie was 7, I was trying to say to her, you know, advertising really, glorifies the hungry women. You know, they're too hungry. The models, they're unhealthy. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'll show you. And I open up Oprah Magazine, which is loaded with plenty of makeup, that kind of thing. But I went through, when it was a really thick magazine, I went through the whole magazine. Well, here's what. Oh no. There was not one hungry model in the whole magazine. I closed that magazine. I said, yes, Oprah is walking her talk like nobody's business. And this was after she had gotten through, she stopped focusing on weight and got more into a healthier place where I really caught on to her thing. But it was so refreshing to go through a whole magazine and not see that. So it took effort in my house to show her that. But it's a constant balance of, you just keep having the conversation and pointing out where people yield and where people speak up. And yes, it's awkward. They see you. Kids need to see you get through awkward. And my kids, as painful as it is, they get to watch a lot of that. And my own mother was a champion. I mean, she still is a champion at 90. Sometimes she's playing bridge and there's mean people. My mother will speak up and say, now, that wasn't very friendly. We are just here to have a fun time playing bridge. 90 years old. She's letting people have it. And is it awkward? Yes. They need to see us get out there, stumble, fall, pick ourselves up, and keep going.
Cindy, I've heard you answer this question also, saying that as mothers and adults, we need to stop the piece of being self-critical to show for our daughters.
Good point.
And,
Yes. Michael's talking about, so having your mother talk about weight and body and being self-critical, that I hear moms say, I don't understand why my daughter has like an eating disorder. It mystifies me. Yet, in the same conversation, she said, well, I've lost 1.2 pounds. First of all, I'm scared of your scale that's telling you 1.2. Get the scale out of the house. Get the magazines out of the house. Get the, and my kids are like, why don't we have mirrors? Can't we just get a mirror? I'm like, the less mirrors, the better. And they found some craggly old crack one that they kind of work to get, but you can't really get a good, I say the less you look in a mirror, the less ditch it, get it out of your thing. So living in your body, I think I'm a regular woman, like big bone, big muscle, good layer of frosting. I show my naked self in front of them, and I feel like that is a gift. This regular body is such a gift, and I give them all angles hey, give them that one. Not in a creepy way, but just while they're growing up, and when they got to the point they're like, whoa! But I'm like, this normalness they need to see, because more than ever they need to see a little gelatinous funk. They got to see it, and it's so important because of what they're seeing in the culture is so I feel like for all of them, if any of them have a future naked woman in their life in their bed, I am giving that person the best gift they could have, because and my mother did the same, not consciously, but she just had 7 kids, so nakedness was happening. Never saw my father naked. The guy almost broke his neck trying to jump in his boxers so we didn't see him naked, which wasn't healthy. And my older hippie brother was like, that's not healthy. We are going to be naked in front of you. So I was like, okay, that's a lot of data, but all right. And so you need to get a normal idea. But my mom was constantly showing get naked. So by the time she had 9 children, okay? She was non-athletic. So after 3 kids in my super normal body, frightening to some people, but feeling good for myself, I was like, yeah, I like this. This body is industrial strength. Yeah. I can get up and run 20 miles if I must. And if they lock me out on the back porch, I'll survive for days. And, I think that's an important message, the industrial strength body, living in it. We got to show our kids that for sure. Brian.
I'd recommend turning your kids on to Cindy. She's on YouTube. And
He showed
that's
his
why her
daughter.
daughter's got some of that strength. And I accidentally sat next to my daughter's boyfriend's mom when I first saw your show. And so 4 months later, I got tickets for the couple. And they were the youngest in the room and a little bit uncomfortable, but it was super helpful.
I think you were the bravest. I remember those brave. I was like, what's she doing here? She's going to get an earful. But I think we think, well, we'll wait till they're ready. They're navigating all this stuff. Even if they're not hooking up, even if they haven't developed. I was about 2'7" in 9th grade, flat-chested, no period in sight. I was like a little, I don't know what I was going. It was not even slightly developed in 9th grade, but I was navigating what I was hearing in high school. So imagine what kids are hearing. And people always say, but he's not ready, he hasn't developed, I'm sure he's not interested. They're trying to make sense of this world. early exposure. I mean, taught my kids, thanks to Michael Lyons, first grade, talked to them about sex. Why is that? Because they're either going to hear about it on the playground, the bus, or they're going to have, and you can keep every device out of their life, but they have friends with devices who come and talk to them about stuff, and they're like, whoa, yikes, what is that? And they come home and ask you that. You haven't talked to them about sex, and all of a sudden they come home and ask you some really gross, crazy thing. Like, preemptive strike pays off. So I always said to my kids, we'll watch movies with sex going on in the movies. If it's healthy and, you know, like, or even if it's not, we're going to discuss. So there's always discussion. And they just got used to it. And they just got used to your kids get used to, even if you haven't talked to your kids and they're 19, 20, you say, look, I have failed you. We're going to start now. They're going to be like, no. But this is secretly a little bit of this. The research says they want to know what we think. They want to know what the adults think in their lives. And I say, keep spraying them with the information. And they can't unknow. And some of the things you can do, some parents have told me some great techniques. And pass this on to your kids who have little kids. So you start talking to your kids about sex. And one parent said what she did is she said, I'd say I got 5 minutes. 5 minutes is always what we're gonna do. You do the timer. We're gonna sit on the couch, she with her son. They're both facing front, so you don't have to look at each other. And start the timer, and she just starts going. They cannot unknow what you put out there. You lay it down. Boom, 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 boom. Timer goes off. Questions? Nope. And you can't say, oh, one more thing. It's like the timer went off. See you next time. One mom said they go back to back. They sit in bed back to back. And she just tells her. And it's just less, and I get my kids in the car on the highway because in our like kind of neighborhood, if you get to a stop sign, I think they're gonna roll out if I get a chance. And like my son, he was like one time he's like pressed against the door. He said, I knew I shouldn't have come with you to the bus station. And we were in so deep. But he's secretly thankful. When he was 13, he said, one thing I'm grateful for, Mom. He said, our family meetings when we have appreciations for each other, and I expected him to thank me when he was 40. I'm game to be the heinous mom till 40, but he said, I'm thankful for the appreciations we give each other, and I'm thankful for the open sex talk. I just feel like a lot of people don't know, and I'm glad I know. Other questions? Yes.
I'm curious about screen time for all ages and kind of, you know, I get this theme of communication, but when it comes to controlling access, what do you recommend for parents of young children and adolescents and, you know?
Okay, so these days you're seeing a lot more phones with much younger kids. So when my kids are now 15, 17, 19, Michael has kids a little older than I, and I was like, what are you doing? He said, well, we waited until halfway through 8th grade to get a kid a phone. So my senior, and they have to pay for it monthly, and I'll tell you this, those phones don't break and they don't get lost. Like, amazing. But when you're paying for it, or buy, never around birthday or Christmas do I make phone gear, swag, any of the stuff they got. The phone is their life. And one kid's paying $63 a month because he wanted the supersonic phone. Two are paying $50. Sadie, she was like, I will work my ratty old phone. The first one she got, it was breaking. She ordered a new screen and learned to fix it. She broke that one. It was still worth it to still not get a new phone. She learned people hired her to change their screen. She worked that phone so she could pay $20 a month, and then finally it lost it, and then she had to go to the more expensive one. But so the oldest one, he got to halfway through 8th grade, he goes, that's not worth my money. And then he got lost on a mountain biking thing when he was in 9th grade, and he was like, you know what, I need a phone. So then he was fine with Sadie, waited till 8th, and then my youngest, all his friends had a phone. He was the only kid without a phone, and he felt so left out. It was a gift. It was a gift. It was a gift to be the kid that's deprived. You get used to it. You get a little more social courage. You get more comfortable. You also get practice on the telephone. That kid is a champ on the telephone because he had to call to talk to some people, and he's great at it. And when your kids are constantly here, they don't want to get on the phone. They will avoid it at all costs. You could throw that kid on with anyone. He's game. So it's getting harder because so kids who are seniors right now, they probably were on Facebook in middle school. Kids who are in 9th grade were probably on 4 platforms all through middle school. And I think there's other people who have more wisdom on the timing of it, but I think the longer you can wait with good reasoning and continued conversation, and then screen time, that's a negotiation, that's a battle. So I don't monitor my kids' phones. I just say, in the car, we're not gonna have phones because I want you to engage with the people. And even when their friends come over, I'm that mom who's like, hey, fellas, put the phones away. Or go home to your own couch and you guys can text away all afternoon from home. Save on gas, save on chips, get on out. Or engage with the people. And they at first they're like, oh, Cindy, like this. But then they kind of rise up, and you just keep saying it, keep talking about engage with the people you're with. Because what is the message when you're sitting next to someone texting? You're telling them, like, you're kind of interesting, but not that interesting. And I've got a whole collection of much more interesting people on the other end of this phone. I mean, that's the message you're sending. So, but screen time on their own, like, when your kids are at home, I just keep saying, that 7 to 9, put the phones away. It's noisier, it's more irritating, there's more motion in the room, but it's awesome. Conflict is where empathy is built, and so there's more conflict, there's more snaggles because they're paying attention to each other more. But the getting the earphones on and plugging in. So back in the day, coaches used to fight over the AM station, kids are talking, you'd have amazing conversations, driving to a game, driving to a race. These days, it is kids plugged in their own space. We got to get kids out and tell them why we want you out is because we want you to build empathy. We want you to get in here and, engage, connect, interact, learn how to read social cues. Just keep having the conversation. Great books about this are The Big Disconnect by Catherine Steiner Adair, Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle, and there are more. In my drifty old mind somewhere. On my website I've got some more. And there's also new ones. Screenwise by Devorah Heitner, that's another one. But it's just about 8 o'clock. Can I take one more question? Yes.
In your book, do you deal with the expectations that are created from porn and how that translates into the relationship of these kids that are just falling together?
Yeah, that's kind of my main thing, is that authentic, connection is what this is about, and that really better sex is I'm aiming for the better sex. The better sex is happening for people who connect and communicate. And some people who don't have sex for forever, who are the last people to have sex, actually know more about sex because they actually took their time, chose their partner carefully. And I interviewed a guy, and I put this in there and I say it in most of my talks where I'm allowed to. I interviewed a guy who, this was before texting was going, phones were still being used as actual phones. And so I'm in this fraternity and I'm chatting these guys up and they're telling me, well, we learned from this guy, he's coming soon. And he's in the hall taking calls. He taught us this and he taught us that. And I'm like, okay, well wait do you hear? Because he's taught us everything. He's in the hall, and I'm sure it's another lady lining up because they told me he has had 60 partners. He's 21 years old. He's had 60 partners aside from the STI soup. I'm thinking, and this was early in my game. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm going to learn something from Mr. Big Stuff, right? So finally he busts through the door because I was interviewing the group. They weren't coming to hear me. I was kind of interviewing them. And he comes in. So you want to hear what the ladies love? He says, and he goes, well, what they like, and he starts to imitate his technique of this major blender move, horrific thing. I'm like, oh. So he's like, this is what I start with. And he says, this is when I'm going to strike everything. He thinks he's going to hit the clitoris. And then he goes right in. I'm like, here it comes, the old porn move, jackhammer. And he goes, and then I, boom, chicka boom. And he does this whole thing. And I was like, but his phone rang, which was awesome. And he had to go take another call, the next lady lining up. And the fellas all turned to me like this. They're watching him like this. Oh, they turn back to me. What do you think? I'm like, fellas, lateral movements? No. Jackhammer? No. You know where I hear this? When I talk to 50 sorority women and they're like, why do guys do that jackhammer thing? And my answer is, why don't you speak up? Well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. What is wrong with us? So here we are in this communication scene but yet we're not communicating. So good sex, that's what I'm after, like real, healthy, positive sex. All right. Oh, one more.
What's a 720?
720. Oh, it's a 2 360s. Like kids who on their skis do these 720s. They spin around. They used to be called helicopters. So when I say to my kids, "Do you do a helicopter?" They're like, "Mom, shh." Like, it's a 360, man, like, or 520.
So it's not a sexual move.
No, it's not a sexual move. But I didn't even bring up the whole dick pic and nude thing. It is so common for kids, like, boys will say, oh, I sent out, if I send 10 dick pics out and I get 3 nude pictures back, that's a pretty good yield, it's worth it. And the things they put out there on the screen, I mean, dick pics and nudes, it's so common, so common. And yes, it's illegal. They don't care because they have the forethought of a flea. And when they do get caught, it's bad, it goes bad quickly. And telling them stories, so one young woman sent a nude picture with emojis, someone else got the picture, removed the emojis, and spread it wildly. So she didn't even try to send a nude picture. Just heard about 3 girls who had sent out nude pictures when they were 14 are now showing up on a Russian website for kiddie porn. And there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, they're trying to make something happen, but how scary is that? So that's a whole other dimension. All right, thank you very much.